Seeing Jason in your dreams with a slightly different deco. Here's your look at the Friday the 13th Part 5, A New Beginning, reissue Dream Sequence Jason Voorhees. Young Tommy Jarvis may have escaped from Crystal Lake, but he's still haunted by the gruesome events that happened there. When gory murders start happening at a secluded halfway house for troubled teens where he now lives, it seems like his nightmarish nemesis Jason Voorhees is back for more sadistic slaughters. Has Jason returned from the grave? While old Jason is teasing Tommy in nightmarish dreams, we're going to go ahead and have a look at the figure. The first thing, of course, we're going to do is take the tape measure just to see how tall Jason Voorhees stands. And we're also, of course, going to bring in the original release Jason Voorhees from the Dream sequence. So you can see that there are differences, in fact, between the two figures. In the meantime, though, Jason stands 7 inches exactly, or the figure is going to be 18 centimeters tall. Now, for you naysayers that are saying, why even invest the time or the money to get another Jason when you already have this figure in your collection, let's just bring in the original Jason we looked at from the Dream sequence, so you can see that there are, in fact, changes that have been made. No, not necessarily the mold, but you'll definitely see that there's a lot more wetness to the newer Jason that we got released this year, in fact. I'll bring also the boxes in for comparisons. Another comparison also, while we're on the topic of reissues. Here's what the Dream sequence Jason from A New Beginning looks like with the reissue Jason Voorhees that we got from Friday the 13th Part 4, the final chapter. I guess considering that I did mention boxes and all, let's go ahead and bring the boxes in right now for the Dream sequence Jason Voorhees. This Jason Voorhees to the right is the original one we got before. The one here to the left is the one we got released. I did say this year. Technically, it's a lot number of 2022. I always find it funny also with the boxes that the front of the box looks nothing like Tommy, but rather instead it looks like Sean Astin from Goonies. Doesn't it look a little bit like Goonies, which is somewhat ironic because he's also hunting down One-Eyed Willie. Jason also has one eye. Is there a connection? Maybe there's a connection. But the front of the box are going to be a little bit, well, somewhat similar. I feel, if anything, the newer box may have a little more faded coloring to it. Also, though, one thing I always try to do in these reviews of the reissue figures is try to show you the lot numbers. So the original lot number, just to stack them up here, the original one that we looked at years before actually was from, well, 367N061518. The last 2 digits usually refer to the year of the lot number or when it was produced in the factory. The newer one that you would be looking for if you're interested to get this specific Jason is 367N021722. So there's about a difference of, 4 years between both the productions of these in the factories. Again, other than that, like the boxes themselves look to be about the same. But again, I would say, if anything, like the newer release one that we got from 2022 has a slightly more faded front image with a Sean Astin from Goonies. And while it would have worked for Sloth, the likelihood of giving a baby Ruth to Jason to make him go away is slim to none, so I wouldn't even bother. Funny, though, that I would use the reference of Goonies in talking about Sean Astin, because also in Goonies and in Friday the 13th 4 and the beginning of 5, Corey Feldman would have starred in both movies. How about that? Let's have a look at the accessories, though, that come include a Dream sequence Jason. The first thing that we'll have a look at doesn't necessarily belong to him, and it's not really so much a riddle. I guess you could have it displayed with this figure, but one thing that this figure does come included with is the split hand that we see at the end of Friday the 13th Part 4. Again, you could use this hand with this Jason, but we never got this hand with the original Part 4 release. So, just to reach off camera once again and bring in the reissue Part 4, this Jason hand, of course, would then swap out with this hand right here. You'll already notice there's a different color between the two hands. This one's a lot darker. This looks actually like it's been off of Jason's forearm for a while and decayed, but you can swap it out if you want to. If you wanted to get the split hand and disappointed that Part 4 Jason did in fact not come included with it, you could use this hand instead. I'm going to move that Jason out of the way. While we are also still holding hands, let's go ahead and holding hands. Let's bring in the hand that actually would have come included with the original Dream sequence Jason to see that the colors start right away by changing much darker and gray for this hand, more the warmer tones that we would have got with the original Jason split finger hand. The red is also seeming to be still alive. I don't know what's pumping out of Jason's body, but it doesn't look like healthy blood. You can see the hands are definitely a lot grayer in this case than the lighter colors that we got with this release. And also, one thing they've also improved upon with this replacement hand is that the darker nails are now colored, whereas the original nails didn't have it. So there's definitely improvements already there, just alone with these two hands. Move that to the side. And again, you can use this really with this Jason if you want to. I'm much rather instead going to be displaying this with Part 4 Jason. Let's put that to the side. The next thing I did want to look at, though, is the tombstone. The tombstone, for me, looks a little, first of all, crooked. I feel like it needs to be just a little straighter. There's no way for me to fix it. But you can see there's the tombstone that we got with the reissue Dream Sequence Jason. And again, here's the one that we got with the original one. That's quite the difference. Yeah, there is a difference. Obviously, the sculpting is going to be exactly the same between the two, but you got much brighter, first of all, dirt on this one. The boards also seem darker, and the one thing I really like about this one is that Jason Voorhees seems faded. Somebody would have just painted this onto the boards and just plunged this into the ground, and obviously this would start to fade over time. If you prefer something that looks like it's just been more freshly applied, then the original Dream Sequence Jason would have had the much brighter looking Jason font on the tombstone. Just flip this around to the back. You can see that there's not much different really between the two. The nails, the rusted nails seem a little bit more obvious here on the back of this one, whereas this one seems only more suggested than anything else. I personally like this one a little bit more, but if, again, you like the brighter font, no one has to necessarily say that you have to use the same accessories that come included with these figures. If you'd rather use like this tombstone with this Jason, I don't think anyone's going to say you're not allowed to do that. The figure also comes included with the ice pick. And just again, to reach off to the side here, here's the ice pick that came included with the original release. The first release that we got from 2018 definitely has a more shinier handle. It's also seemed to be also a darker brown. This is more of a muted brown. The silvers also seem a little bit brighter here on the newer release. So again, like just pick your poison, or pick your pick, so to speak. Decide for yourself which way you want to display. I would never really display Jason with Voorhees with really either one of these, but I like the idea that, of course, NECA always includes stuff like this. Let's move that to the side. Then the figure also comes included. Let's look at the axe next before we get to the machete. Here's the axe for the reissue Jason Voorhees from, again, 2022. Here's the Jason Voorhees axe that came with the other one released before. Now, I do like the red, the way they've applied it onto the actual axe head, just a little bit more on the original release, because it looks like it just got smeared across the head, as he's, of course, hacking and slashing bodies. This one has a few little spots and patches where the blood hasn't quite trickled over top of it, or haven't run across the head of the axe. I think, for me at least, not that I'm an axe-wielding maniac. Awkward silence. Though I'm not an axe-wielding maniac. I think if he's going to be hacking anybody, the blood would just basically be smeared across the head. I don't think you're going to have these little empty spots like this. So again, choose which one you would prefer. The original head, by the way, the original handle is a much lighter brown. The newer one, we get a more darker brown. So again, it's just a personal preference more than anything else. And then finally, before we get down to his interchangeable heads, Jason Voorhees, of course, comes included with his machete. And we're going to go ahead and grab the other machete here. The little rivets, of course, that take the two halves of the handle and sandwich them together. You can see like the rivets are a little bit more brighter in silver, a little more muted on the original release. The blade also, the bottom one is the newer one. The one to the top is the original release. The blades seem a little shinier on the older machete. Seem a little more duller on the one below. Now I have to kind of stop and think for myself. Did I grab the right machete? Maybe this is the newer one. Maybe this is the older one. Biscuits. I've probably mixed them up. But either way, though, like the blades, you can see they're a little bit different. This one's a little more smoother the way they've painted. This probably is the newer one. And the one down below, you can see there's a little more of the brush strokes, little paint marks across the blade. I'm going to assume that this is the newer one. I'm going to put this with the rest of the pile of the accessories. And then, of course, we're going to then beeline our attention over to all the swappable heads. The thing I really like, and I've always liked about Dream Sequence Jason, is the fact he comes with 4 interchangeable heads. And it's actually not so much a bad idea that I did pick up a reissue, because whatever heads I actually like with this figure, I may then ultimately display with the other Jason Voorhees. For the head options that come included with the figure, the first thing we'll have a look at is this one. Now, this one I really like because this is taken from the poster and the marketing that they use for Friday the 13th Part 5. Jason never really wears this mask at all, not only in this movie, but in any of the movies in the franchise. It just was only strictly used for promotional artwork. Now, I suppose you could also use this for a custom of Lord Humongous from Road Warrior, as that's certainly something similar you would have had for a mask. I think Lord Humongous actually would have used a more silver mask, but it's very similar design to one we get right here. The hairs, though, subtly painted. You can see there's only just a few traces of hairs. But again, like just to show you this one, and then to bring in the original one. The eyes are a little bit brighter. I wouldn't necessarily say that the black is no different from this to this one, but it does seem like this mask is also brighter than this mask we get right here. The straps to the side look to be painted the same. The hairs also look like they're very similar. This one looks like it's a little bit more muted also in the flesh tone, whereas this one seems a little also shinier. But again, like the head sculpts are very similar to one another. The next head sculpt that we'll have a look at, I suppose we could look at really the one that's already on the neck. This is the one that has the worms. If we really were to work in order outside of the one they use for promotional images, then this really would have been the next Jason that we would have looked at head sculpt wise. And of course, he's laying inside the casket and eventually sits himself up and then pursues Tommy. Now, again, this one I actually already have on top of the figure's body, so I'm going to bring this one in. I think this is a better looking head sculpt, honestly. The worms seem like a darker color. Also, the discoloration of the mask, I think, works better on this one than we get on here. The way they've actually wet the mask, what they've essentially done is they've taken the lighter beige color and then they've brushed onto it a gray color to sort of give it the look that the mask is not only wet, but it's also been inside of a casket for a long time. This one is a little lighter. This one's the more darker of the two. And again, I think the paint is just a little bit sharper between the two head sculpts. And to look at the back of the head, so you can also see as well, this one's a lighter skin tone. This one's got a little bit more red in the skin tone or the flesh of the back of his head. There's the two differences between the two heads. The next head sculpt that we'll have a look at is now one that's got the worms removed. And then we've got this one right here. It's really not that much different from the one that we already have that has the worms. It's just more of a preference. Do you like worms on Jason's mask or you prefer no worms? I kind of like the worms myself. But just to, again, put this figure down here for a second and grab the one that we got before. Here's the other Jason Voorhees mask. I might, in this case, actually say that the original mask does things a little bit better. The chevron, as you can see, is brighter red. The eyes also seem to stand out more on this release than this release here. And again, just to show you the back of the heads. In all the cases, it seems like the 2018 release was more reddish in color and more lighter color when we get to this head sculpt. Other than that, I mean, obviously no retooling had to happen here. They're just using the same molds as before. And we're going to move those out of the way. And then the last mask that we see at the end of the movie where Jason, once again, as an illusion, is standing in the inside hospital room along with Tommy himself. Tommy's looking up and, of course, he sees Jason's just standing there, trickling of the blood there on the one side of his mask. He's got all this nice blood there on the side of his face. This is the one mask that I think really does change better with the newer release. Not only is the mask a more darker, kind of a yellowish beige versus the one we got before, but also when you see this, the coloring of the blood, I like the darker, more burgundy color of the red versus the more just suggested red that they painted on this one. This actually does look like it was applied with the paint still wet. This one looks like there's a couple of coats of paint that's been added on top of it. And while we're certainly looking through all of these, you can let me know down below in the comments section which mask you think is better of all the ones that we've looked at, reissue or the original one. In this case, I would definitely give it to the reissue being the better of the lot. To change out the heads, by the way, is pretty easy on the figure. The first couple of times you're going to have to do this, you want to heat the heads in hot water. But go ahead and just remove the head from the post. And just for the sake of this, seeing as this is the last head sculpt that we see at the end of the movie, let's pop this back onto the post. Probably could have heated this just a little bit more. And once that's all the way on, here's what Jason Voorhees looks like. You know, honestly, with this mask also being the way that it is, with a little bit more yellow added to it, it kind of also, with this suit being as wet as it looks a little like Nightmare on Elm Street. I was going to say, not Nightmare on Elm Street, Friday the 13th Part 8, Jason Takes Manhattan. Just certainly the way it's wetter with the complexion, and also with the mask being more yellow like this, it looks a little bit like more Part 8 Jason. When to, of course, bring in the other figure, the biggest thing I wanted to point out between the two bodies is not that the body's been designed differently, but there's definitely a lot more wetness. Now, neither of these figures obviously are wet, but they've added more of a clear coat to the finish on this one versus the original one that we got before. Some may look at this and say it's excessive, that maybe they didn't have to put so much on the reissue Jason, that the original one that we got before was fine. In fact, just to reach off, as seeing as I already had the figure already, here's again what the final chapter Jason looks like versus the dream sequence that we looked at before. There's definitely a notable difference where this one does look, again, wet, like it's covered in rain, whereas this one's a little bit more drier. The suits themselves, or the shirts themselves, I actually just had the hand falling off of part 4, Jason. Let's just go ahead and pop that back on there. There we go. The shirts themselves, as you can see, are exactly the same. The molds are going to be the same, as well as the pants. The pants and the boots also seem to be sharing the same molds. So again, like this would have been the original one. And then just again, show you the stark difference to bring back in the reissue. There is a lot more rain settled on the clothing here. I like it myself. Again, some would say it's maybe a little bit too much, but I like the more wetter look of Jason. I mean, if he's sitting outside and Tommy has a dream of Jason pursuing him in the rain, then obviously Jason's going to have wetter looking shirts, wetter looking pants. And I think the reissue handles it a little bit better. Now, obviously, we're going to move this guy out of the way. To bring then back in the other Jason, the coloring of the pants is something that you see a little more of the color of the brown happening here in the original release. With this one, with so much of this slick coat of paint, this slick clear coat, it definitely does look like when with the light hitting it, looks a little more silver, doesn't it? I don't know, maybe it's just my eyes. But again, just to look at the two, more preference again than anything else, but I really like the look of this one a little bit more. So for the articulation on this guy, it's going to be exactly the same as the Jason we looked at before. So again, we're going to kind of run through this right now. Being that the head is on a post, it does rotate the head all the way around. You have the head looking down and looking up, and you can also rock it back and forth as well. Again, with the one thing I really like about now picking up a second one of these is this Jason Voorhees is one of my personal favorites. Now I can have the options of kind of mixing and matching, changing out the heads, and having more than one Jason on display. As for the arms do come out at 90 degrees. This one actually is a little less than 90 because it seems like the shoulder's a little tighter on the figure. But if not for that, you can actually bring them out at 90 degrees. You can take the arms and rotate them all the way around. And that would be, of course, also the same on this side as well. The figure does have a single hinge only in the elbow, but that does still allow for the forearm to rotate back and forth. The hands also rotate all the way around. The upper torso is on a ball joint. By the way, this, I'm sure you guys already know this by now, but the shirt is a softer plastic that they've used. And even, you know, just feeling this, it feels like it's got wet. Like there's slime covered all over it. Love the finish that they added to this. The legs do split out, and of course you can take those legs and move forward. You can move them back. It's a mild swivel at the top of the thigh, only possessing a single hinge on the knee. And I almost feel like with them adding this clear finish over top of it, it's making all the joints tighter than what they would normally be. He has a rotation at the lower leg, the lower part of his calf, and then he's got the articulation up and down on his feet. And of course, you can also rock him back and forth as well. Now, again, I've mentioned this in other reviews too. Getting a reissue figure does not always guarantee, one, a better looking figure. And again, when you're looking at this guy, and we looked at this guy before, some would even say like the way that they've painted this initial figure was better. It doesn't look as wet. It doesn't look as dark. I personally like the darker color scheme myself because, of course, if Jason's out in the rain, his shirt would not only get visibly darker, but it would get a lot wetter than I think what was approached initially with this first dream sequence Jason. But again, it's not to say that I'm going to be putting this guy away now simply just because I've got myself the reissue and what I feel to be a better looking Jason. No. In fact, this guy is going to again get reused, and I'm probably then going to take any one of the other heads that came included with the figure. This one, or even the one that has, well, again, I've got the worms already on this one, so I might even just keep the worms on this one. Or maybe I'll just mix and match them. I don't know. Maybe I might just put the worm mask on this one, and then I'll put... Either way, I'll figure it out. But with Jason having the mileage of extra molds with his head sculpts does mean, in fact, that even if you do decide to get this guy yet again, you can always then use those other heads and get different looks for Jasons when you have them on your shelf. Unlike the Nightmare on Elm Street Part 3 Dream Warriors reissue Freddy that we just recently looked at here on this channel that I feel under-delivered with a cosmetic change, I think, honestly, all the Jason Voorhees reissue figures have all turned out better than the initial releases that we've got before. The reissues we've already had a look at, the Part 3, the Part 4, we just actually, in fact, used the Part 4 for comparisons in this review, and now Dream Sequence Jason, not to mention also we just recently looked at Friday the 13th Part 2 Jason, that's right. So we've looked at 4, I think, reissues here on this channel, and in all the cases, I think the cosmetic changes are warranting enough to pick these figures up again, even if you already have them in your collection. Now, some would be a little turned off by the idea that they did apply a lot of wetness here with Jason. His shirt is very visibly darker and wetter than the one we got before. I like it. Some may be turned off the idea and may actually prefer the 2018 lot number version versus the 2022. But again, if you guys are interested to get this one for yourself, I did actually find this one over on Entertainment Earth's website. It seems my go-to place, and a lot of times the question I get from you guys is, what's your favorite place to go and get newer Jasons? How do you know? Where do you can go to get the newer Jasons? Well, if you don't have local comic book stores in your area where you can check your lot numbers, because again, you're going to be looking at those last 2 digits to dictate the year in which these guys were released. If you don't have that option and those stores aren't stocking them, go to places, like I said, at Entertainment Earth, like hot off the truck will tell you right away, they just restocked this guy, and the likelihood is they're going to be restocking with new stock because they're getting it directly from the factory. Another question I usually get from you guys is, what's your favorite Jason Voorhees figure? Well, I would honestly say Dream Sequence is probably my second favorite Jason that we've gotten from this. My first is the reissue Part 4, and while some would say that's blasphemy that you're not even putting Part 7 as number 1, Part 7 for me, I would say, is number 3. New Blood Jason, then I would say Dream Sequence Jason. I kind of really like this one a little bit more than the 2018 version. So I would say this one, and then I would say the reissue Part 4 Jason as my top 3 favorite Jasons. What are your favorite Jason Voorhees? If you were to list the top 3 favorites that we've gotten from NECA, what would those be? And would any of the ones that I chose be on your list as well? Let me know down below in the comment section. And again, I'll provide the link down below in the video description if you guys are interested. Get this guy. He, I believe, is still in stock over on Entertainment Earth's website. Again, I'll provide the link down below. Certainly as well, if you enjoyed this video, I want to hit with a like. If you're loving the content you guys are seeing and on board to certainly stick around for more, if you haven't already done so, can I shamelessly plug that you hit the subscribe button down below? And can I also shamelessly plug that you turn the bell notification on so you're going to get those reminders every single time a new video posts? And also, if you guys are interested and still have a little bit more time on your hands before you have to go anywhere else for this afternoon, you guys want to check out more reviews I've done for Jason Voorhees, popping up at the very end of this video will be a playlist of all the other Jason Voorhees I've looked at over the years, with many more to follow. As always, guys, thanks for watching. See you guys next time.